Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just for housekeeping purposes, we'll get it out of the way straight away. If you'd like to ask any questions throughout the webinar, please use the chat function, or you've also got the Q&A, and I'll relay the questions to our special guest. Hopefully, we will take no more than 70 minutes this evening, and hopefully it'll be really informative for everybody. We will have an informal Q&A at the end of this webinar if you want to have any additional questions. Thanks for joining us, and let's get going. So welcome to Coach Connects. Tonight's webinar is Best Practice in Coaching. I'm joined by our special guest this evening, Andy McRae. Andy, I can come up with loads of superlatives for you tonight, but it's probably best coming from you. So would you like to introduce yourself to everybody this evening?
Thanks, Stephen. So for those who don't know me, my name is Andy McCrea. I've been coaching cricket for over 30 years. My club, as you can see in the green square, there's Temple Patrick Cricket Club in the NCU, just about 10 miles north of Belfast, where I've been the club development officer there for over 20 years, working with various age groups from 4-year-old all the way up to the adults. And I've also been involved in interprovincial coaching, and bottom of the little green box there, you can see that I'm a Cricket Ireland coach developer. So I've been working in coach education for 17 years. So hopefully I've been involved in lots of different environments and can hopefully pass some information on tonight.
Thanks for that, Andy. So just to get a bit of a feel for our audience tonight, if everybody could use the chat function, if you wouldn't mind just throwing in where you're coming from tonight and what level are you currently coaching at. So, for example, Stephen Maxwell from Dublin. I'm the coach education manager at Cricket Ireland. I'm an adult club coach. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that into the chat, and we'll get going then. Thanks, Abdul. If everybody can just use the Q&A, then it's coming through here that it's working. I don't know why it's not for you, Abdul. So if you want to just throw it into the Q&A, that'd be perfect. Thank you. So getting going, Andy. So the learning outcomes for tonight. So by the end of this webinar, through learning, you should be able to apply the minimum requirements expected of a coach, describe what good coaching should look like, establish good coaching structures in your clubs. So that's what we're going to go through over the course of this evening. These are the topics we're going to cover. Andy has some knowledge, some experiences, and some stories to share with us this evening to help you in your coaching as well. So within the chat or the Q&A, we'll ask everybody on the call tonight, what does best practice look like in your coaching? So if you wouldn't mind us taking an opportunity, what does best practice look like in your coaching? Andy, while everybody's doing that, would you mind give us your opinion? What does best practice look like in your environment?
Well, hello everybody. Thanks for logging in firstly. And the plan is really that hopefully you find this very relevant to you in whatever environment you're working on. When Stephen and I were sort of putting this together, we wanted to make sure that, yes, obviously it's going to be cricket chat from a Cricket Ireland point of view, but you might be coaching in other environments, and hopefully some of the bits and pieces, the generic coaching stuff are useful to you in those other areas. Because let's be honest, coaches should really be supported by their clubs, and in turn, clubs should know what their coaches are up to, and hopefully know that their coaches are doing a good job. And it's all about trying to make sure that things are being done correctly. See, I'm just checking the chat there a wee second, so I'm not getting all the chat there, Stephen. So I'm hoping you're picking the chats.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'll come at you with a few questions now, Andy.
Oh. Good stuff. And I know you were going to ask me that, so I've got my sort of thoughts on the next slide, Stephen. So I don't really want to divulge my thoughts yet. They're on the slide after everybody else has sort of got their thoughts onto
that's no problem at all, Andy. So we've got an awful lot of youth coaches on the call. anything from under 9s all the way up to under 17s with us this evening, by the looks of it at the moment. One really good point here: engaging athletes, enjoying their time learning and practicing their skills. So thanks for sharing that, Mark.
Very
so
good.
This is what best practice looks like. Andy, over to you on this one.
Okay, so Stephen had done a bit of an interview with me a little while back, and one of the questions I knew he was going to ask me, Andy, what's your philosophy? And while I don't have a written out philosophy about what my coaching style is, I've got several buzzwords that I think should be included in sessions. So Stephen has put them into little bullet points there. So the blue words there are my words. And I think it's crucial that there's learning. If the players aren't learning in the session, well, then you're not coaching them. It's really not supervision in my eyes. So players coming, then going home, and nothing's been learnt. Hopefully they've had a good time, but it hasn't really been coaching. It's just been facilitating and supervising. Of course, we'll have to have fun and enjoyment, and then hopefully safe. Because we don't want anybody going home hurt, and if there's people are getting hurt on a regular basis, then there needs to be questions asked by the club as to what sort of coaching is going on. And development first, and I don't want to dig into that too much because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Everybody likes a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of praise, no matter what age we are. So kids will really buy into that. If they feel they're being encouraged and they're being nurtured along in the right direction, they'll absolutely love that. Old style coaching is gone, where I'm the coach, I'm in charge, and it's now two-way. We have to engage with people. We have to get their thoughts and indeed share our thoughts. So kids love to engage and love to have that interaction. Things, of course, have to be planned, and we'll come to that a little bit later as well. Otherwise, the wheels can come off very, very quickly. But while we plan, we also have to be adaptable and flexible, because we might have to react to game situations in front of us. Issues might arise that we have to go off in a different direction. So while we plan, we still have to be adaptable and flexible. And I'm big into maximizing participation. I hate to see drills where it's one coach, one ball, and 10 kids lined up to take a high catch. One kid stands at the front, coach hits them a high catch, they take it, they throw it back to the coach, and then they run and join the back of the line and wait 3 minutes for their turn to participate again. So maximizing participation, I think, is crucial. And becoming more and more relevant now is context. What is the relevancy of this session with regards to where are we taking it into game situations? So kids want to learn, but they also want to know, why are we learning this and why is this relevant to us? So I think that's a decent list for best practice. And if you've got most of those things in your session, you're running pretty good sessions, to be honest.
So it's safe to say, Andy, if we go watch you coaching in Temple Patrick next weekend, you're going to tick all those boxes?
I'd like to think so. Maybe not in every session will I tick every single one, but yeah, and I think it's down to practice. The more you practice, those sort of things do come a little bit more naturally. It's like everything in life. Keep the practice up and you become a little bit more proficient with it.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Andy. So just based on what Andy has touched on there as well, and then if we look at the research of why people are coming to watch us coach our sessions or participate in our sessions, Amanda Visick done some research from under 9s up to under 19s. And the question was, what does fun mean to you in your environment? So we're talking children, anybody from under 9s to under 18s, this is the words they were using of what fun meant to them. So if we look at some of the key ones there, trying hard, children think that is fun. Games, playing the game is fun. Having the opportunity to practice is fun. Making friendships is fun. And I think a big one and really important one that you've touched on already, Andy, bottom left, learning and improving. So that's actually something that children find fun in a cricket or a coaching environment. So learning and improving. So there's some research there. I'm happy to share afterwards the actual full paper if coaches want to have a look at. So I'll send you that by email afterwards this evening. Andy, what is great coaching?
Well, going by your previous slide, that's a pretty good place to start. And it's great that you're sharing that, Stephen, because we need to be looking after people. People are the most important resource that we can have. If we've got good people in our club, if we've got good people in our organisation, our clubs and our organisations are going to flourish. So it's about coaching people first before coaching cricket. People are far more important than cricket. While I love cricket and it's a great sport, people are far more important, I have to say. So I think that's ultimately where great coaching starts. It's about looking after people. I think this slide really starts us taking us into modern coaching philosophies. Bottom left-hand corner, most coaching, unfortunately, I think, does live there. Having watched many coaches in action, lots of people still in that old style of coaching where they're pinpointing players' problems, they're telling players how to solve the problems. There's a lot of tell from the coaches. It's a one-way approach where I'm the coach, I've got this information, I have to pass it on to you, the player. And so we've got to break those shackles of that old style coaching, and we've got to move into the modern era where top right-hand corner, great coaching lives here, where we've got to engage with our learners and ask them their thoughts, ask them what their challenges are. Because if we don't ask them, we don't know what they know, and we don't know what they're finding challenging, and we don't know how they're trying to solve their problems. So we've got to engage in two-way conversations, ask questions. And then hopefully on the right-hand side, solutions then will come out of that. But hopefully then if the coaching's been good, it's solutions that they have been able to find themselves through good questioning, through good scenarios set up in practice. So we've got to shift away from old style coaching into what I would say is a more modern philosophical approach. And hopefully then by that we create more independent learners who, when they get out into the middle to playing game scenarios, they have been involved in the learning process, so they can solve their own problems out there in the middle. I've got a little Chinese proverb I think I'll pop in here, Stephen, at this point, where it goes like this: tell me and I will forget, show me and I may remember, but involve me and I will learn. And I think if you take that as a little quote and have most of your sessions can abide by that sort of rule, I think you're in a good place as well.
No, that's a really good one, Andy, in fairness. And just to give another example, Andy, so if I'm out batting and I'm after getting a wicket and I'm walking off, like as a coach, what would you say to me? Would you tell me or would you ask me? And what would you say?
Well, I think we've got to go for positives first. We need to know the background, how the person's got to where they just got to. Have they just scored a 50? Have they just scored a 60, 70? Have they just hit their first ever run, in real cricket? So there has to be some sort of scenario so that we know what sort of place the player might be in. It might have been a first ball duck in an important game to them. So we need to understand the place that the player is in psychologically, but before we just ask random questions. And I think that it has to be supportive. There might be positives we can get in there. It might have been, I was a smashing 4 you hit earlier on in the previous over. So I would be looking to sort of get the positives in first, and then maybe later on, once the child had a chance to process what had happened, what was your thoughts on you losing your wicket today? Rally and see what they think, rather than me, because I wasn't in the situation. I wasn't dealing with all the things they were dealing. We need to ask them a nice open question and see what they come back with. And then hopefully you're well practiced enough that you can tease a nice conversation along and be supportive, but still be inquisitive, because you want to challenge them in getting better. Therefore, you've got to have knowledge yourself so that you can take the conversation down the correct path. Brilliant. So I've spoofed my way out of that one, but I honestly think that's a fair enough approach.
No, I think it's a very good point, Andy. And like you've touched on it there a few times through that. And the big thing from my point of view as well is judging the effort that was made just because someone has received a wicket. Okay, what came beforehand? Mm-hmm. And you've talked through it there about judging the effort before you want to tell or ask that question. Judge the effort first, and I think that's really important for coaches. So just moving on from that, we've asked you a few questions already, guys, and the interaction has been great so far. So we're just wondering, what are the biggest challenges you face in your coaching? If you wouldn't mind throwing it into the Q&A there for a moment, please. What are the biggest challenges you face in your coaching? Andy, while everybody's typing away there, I'll ask you that same question. What is the biggest challenge you currently face in your coaching?
In a club environment, it's definitely dealing with kids of a similar age, but at a different ability. So maybe an under 13s is a great example of it, because you've got your year 8s, or your first year in post-primary school. So you've got some who are completely new to the game. Their new skill is the first time they've been offered cricket, and they've thought, this is good, I'm going to give this a go, and then they join a club. And then you've got, within a club environment, you've got others who've maybe played cricket since they've been 6, 7, 8 years old. So setting up sessions which cater for mixed ability, I think, is my biggest challenge, and indeed the coaches at my club, because our under 13s last year had 45 children in the squad. So it was a real challenge to make sure everybody got something of value at their particular level.
Brilliant. And just coming through, and I don't know if this is a problem or a positive, too many kids and not enough coaches. Another one here, we don't have enough qualified coaches. And another one, a lack of coaches. And then let me see, last one here, not enough female coaches. So obviously female teams and no female coaches. Brilliant.
Well, Stephen, just before you go on, Stephen and I were having a little bit of a chat before this webinar started, and the NCU, I'm in the NCU environment, are running coach education courses. And to be fair, there's still room for more buy-in from clubs. So it's up to clubs to sort of feel, right, we need to get people qualified and get people knowledgeable. You know, lots of the stuff that I'm talking about here tonight is stuff that's passed on in coach education. So the coach education courses are there. Do your best to talk your key people onto those courses to get more knowledge.
Brilliant. Two more after coming in there, Andy. So building the relationship with players before they allow you into their circle of trust, and then dealing with parents. And I'd say that's probably a common one with the underage teams as well.
Yeah, we're going to deal with parents later on a few slides later, so we'll leave that one for now. I like that one about building the trust with the players. And I heard a little quote, it was on Twitter actually not too long ago: they won't care what you know until they know you care. I think that sums it up. You've got to show that you're there for these, let's say, young players, and that you're really on their side and you've got their back. So let's be honest, they might be having difficult situations in their home environment or their school environment, and the cricket club or the sports club might be the safe place for them. And if you're the person who's offering a little bit of pastoral care to them, they're going to buy into you big style, and you can really sort of let them fly with that.
Brilliant. And then just to show that the coaches on the call here tonight, you're not alone. Okay, so just based on some research we've done over the course of the last season, the top 6 challenges that coaches need help with. So coaching mixed ability groups. I think, Andy, you've touched on that one. Planning the session and the season, communication and feedback, observation, spot and fix skills, dealing with parents, as was mentioned already, and then using questions as a form of coaching. So some really good challenges there to everybody, Andy.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just touch on a couple there. My particular challenge happens to be number 1 there, and that wasn't me that put that list together, by the way. Stephen has pulled that from research. I think that's about mixing the groups up, how we try to do it anyway. We mix the groups up. We don't want an elite group and a middle group and a lower group, because then the kids very quickly get to know, oh, I'm not in the elite group or whatever. Over the weeks, everybody should be mixed up, so that there's variety of groups, and then of course they get to make more friends. So if you've got mixed groups, then have mixed hitting zones or mixed target zones, so that if somebody's particularly strong in a shot and they can try and score into a small scoring area to score points in that particular drill stroke game, and somebody who's just developing that particular shot, they maybe get a wider target. Maybe they don't score as many points, but at least they can still then have a chance to get it into the bigger target, and if they don't, they still score into the smaller target, but if they don't, they can still get it into the bigger target. So it's catering for all different types within the one drill is key. Communication, and maybe not be exhibiting this tonight, say less. Lots of coaches just talk too much. Keep it simple. You know, if you're talking to a group of kids for 10 minutes, you need to reflect on that. You've lost them after 5, really, unless you're a seriously good talker. And number 4, which we're going to talk a little bit as well, coaches feel the need. We need to fix things. I'm a coach. I need to go and fix this technique. I need, not always, and we'll talk about that later on a little bit. Questions at the bottom there, crucial. We mentioned it earlier. If you want to find out what your performers know, ask them, and that just comes with more and more practice. And maybe video yourself. Don't worry about how good the activity is or how poor the activity is. Video yourself. What are you saying? Record yourself on voice notes or whatever. That's me on that.
Brilliant sharing, Andy. In fairness, lots in there for everybody to take away. So let's get into the nitty gritty of things, everybody. Okay, so in terms of our coaching in our clubs, there is some minimum requirements that we need to enforce. And I know it's come across in the chat there that we don't have enough coaches, but the coaches that we do have, they have to tick certain boxes. And I think the most important thing, Andy, is they're not just doing it for their players. These things are in place to protect themselves. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, coaches need protected by their clubs, so their clubs need to have good structures in place. If things go wrong and the admin isn't there behind to support the club, to support the coach, the challenges will arise. And unfortunately, through media stories, etc., there are unfortunately bad news stories out there. So if you're on here tonight and you need to go back to your club and find out, do we have all the documentation in place? Those are good questions to ask, and we'll talk a little bit about more documentation later on. Just while Stephen has those up, then the Access NI and the guarded vetting, they have to be specific through Cricket Ireland. So if maybe through your job you're a coach in football, or you're working in other different environments with young people, you're going to have lots of Access NI certificates for different environments. So to coach cricket, it has to be done through Cricket Ireland. Stephen, is that the same in guarded vetting? That if you're in lots of different environments, you need lots of guarded vetting certificates? It
is indeed, Andy. So my own example, I'm vetted with the FAI, I'm vetted with the GAA, and I'm vetted with Cricket Ireland. They're all separate, unfortunately. But again, it has to be done. It's just a minimum requirement.
Yeah, and just before you move on, coaching qualification, that's the specific cricket coaching qualification at whatever level. Obviously, once you've done a qualification in coaching, you've got that certificate, and hopefully you'll progress on up. But the other 3 above, they need to be regularly updated. So we'd be looking for people to regularly update their access and either guarded vetting, their safeguarding, or their first aid every 3 years is the standard renewal date on those.
Brilliant, yes. And in terms of the safeguarding, that's renewed every 3 years. You can do a refresher online. It takes 20 minutes once you have your safeguarding level 1. If, for example, I'm in Temple Patrick and there's no safeguarding courses with Sport NI, I can jump online with a safeguarding course anywhere on the island. Once you do a safeguarding level 1, it's irrelevant whether it's Sport NI or Sport Ireland. They're both accepted. So whatever is easy for you guys to access. So Andy, in terms of coaching courses, so we've heard from the audience, we don't have enough coaches, or we have loads of parents, but we don't have coaches. This is their current pathway. How can we get these coaches in?
Yeah, this is the perfect answer for those queries earlier on. So if we start along the left-hand side of the screen, first of all, Cricket Ireland have created these new courses called Activator coaches. So it's a 3-hour course. You spend about 1 hour online and then 2 hours face-to-face with a coach educator, learning some drills, etc. So learning the practical aspects. You've done your online theory about how to communicate with people, what is good coaching. And then you meet up with your coach educator. Hopefully we can get a few people together in one area and do as many activators at the same time. And then you can get out there and support the Smash It and It's Wicked schemes that Cricket Ireland have put together, so the mass participation schemes. So activators are great way for getting sort of, Stephen, you can correct me in the age range, but 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds involved, those sort of later teens, as well as parents who just want to sort of offer young children some sort of start in the game, because the Smash It and the It's Wicked are really aimed at young children, the grassroots. Following on from that, then there's the Coaching Kids. and that's a 6-hour course. There's no assessment on that. You just have to be there, complete the 6 hours, get involved in the course over those hours, and you have that qualification. Usually one day they'll run, although they could be run over 2 evenings at 3 hours. Moving on then to the coaching cricket, as it's called, the green slide there. To give it its nickname, level 1, I suppose everybody seems to call it. And that's a 12-hour course. So you would usually do 6 hours on the first day, 6 hours on the second day, and on the second day, as part of the 6 hours, your coaching is assessed. So you have to be competent. You have to have shown the assessor that you have got the certain skills so that you can go out there into the real world and class yourself as a level 1 coaching cricket coach. And then right-hand side, coming out of the sort of the Cricket Ireland suite of programs, we move to the ECB, where we are on their doorstep, very thankfully can tap into their new course, the ECB Core Coach, as it's called. So that's, again, give it the nickname level 2. So that's replaced the whole sort of regeneration of all the level 2 courses that have gone previously. It's 24 hours of face-to-face coaching. Plus you will have done some online hours before you get to day 1. And really those people who are, let's call them level 2, or give them the new name, core coaches, they're crucial because they're the people who can coach on their own. They are completely autonomous. They've got enough knowledge, they've got enough experience where they can be there and they can run sessions on their own. Now, I've got to put a caveat with that because we'll come to the next slide, which will slightly disagree with me, and you'll see why. But they basically can as a level 2 or as a core coach, you can basically supervise others around you. And I do say level 2 because remember, some people will just have completed in the last years their certificate of coaching. That was level 2. The previous year, some people have done it when it was called level 2. So all those old level 2s are still level 2. Okay.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Andy. And in terms of everybody in the call tonight, we're probably all at different levels, but it's great to see the pathway for everybody visually. Just in terms of the smashing, and it's wicked, Andy, you've touched on the pathway and the age groups, and you can start at 14 years of age. I know your own club, Temple Patrick, have used these programs to increase teams within the club. And just an example, Cork Harlequins, for example, started this program in 2021. They got 17 kids to join on camp, and 15 of them signed up as membership. So it's bringing more members into the club, which brings more parents and hopefully future coaches as well. This year alone, we had 113 activators across the whole island. So we've an awful lot of people across the island starting on their pathway of coaching, which is fantastic to see as well.
Yeah, you put in a random slide there. Just pop that little picture up. That picture threw me when I saw it in here. Didn't know you were going to put this in. And just to tell a story there, the sort of 8 girls in the front, they're all primary school age, so they're 11 and younger, and they've started because we've been out coaching in primary schools, and then we promoted the It's Wicket program, and then they brought along their sister, or they brought along their cousin or their friend or whatever, so it grew a little bit. But the key thing is the 3 taller girls at the back who started their cricket with boys, playing on the boys team. They're now under 15 and they still play on our boys teams. But they want to get involved in promoting girls and ladies cricket. So they trained up as activators, and they come along now and help our girls. We're this year, we're hoping to have lots more just girls specific sessions. So generating the love for it. And those 3 girls in particular, they see that cricket has a lot to offer, and they want to in turn feed something back into the game, which is great.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that experience, Andy. So you've mentioned this, Andy, you've touched on it, the caveat, so I'll leave this one with you.
Yeah, so I did say that an ECB level 2 can coach on their own. And I put a caveat. Now, you shouldn't really have anybody coaching on their own, because what happens if something goes wrong? You wouldn't like to leave one of your coaches isolated and maybe having to deal with maybe a serious incident. So there's these little ECB and Cricket Ireland have sort of tied together. So here's really what we would expect. Now, this might scare a few people once they hear these statistics and they hear these ratios, but this is what's recommended. So if I just start top left, All sessions really should have 2 responsible supervisors. So you really want a level 2 to be one of those people. Now that could be then a parent who has got an access and eye clearance, so it's got the suitable documentation. Can't just be a random person. Okay, so that's where your level 2 is crucial. And then, so level 1s can't be there on their own, activators can't be there on their own. Level 2 coaches are crucial to making good sessions. Then children aged 8 and under, 1 adult to every 8 children. Now, that's a challenge at times because I know at my club we have massive numbers, therefore we're just constantly looking for new coaches to keep that ratio right. Then children aged 9 and over, ratio is a little bit more friendly towards the adults, 1 adult to every 10 children. Now, there's caveats all over the place here. Single session groups must have at least 1 same gender supervisor. Okay, so if it's an all boys session, you hope that there's male coaches there. If it's an all girls session, you'd hope that there's girls supervisors there. And of course, then if it's mixed, there should really be 1 of each. Okay. And as the next box says in the bottom left-hand corner. So regards other ratios, then if you're in the nets, it's a hard ball flying around, and this is for anyone under 18. One coach to every 8 children that are there. Now that scares people because that's high ratio. Okay, a lot of manpower needed there. Group coaching, so say you're out doing fielding, or you're in a hall or somewhere, or it's tennis ball drills on the outfield. 1 coach to every 24 children. But then remember, of course, you can't really have a coach on his own anyway, or her own anyway. So you're really talking 2 coaches to every 24 children. And then hardball, so say it's hardball fielding drills going on in the hall, you're having some sort of throwing of a hardball or whatever. It's 1 coach to 16 children. But then again, remember, you can't have 1 coach on their own. So what we could have, let's take the hardball there. You could have 2 well-qualified, suitably qualified coaches and 32 children. Okay, so you have to play around with the numbers, but you have to keep yourself right. So a level 2 coach, crucial as I said, because they can have a level 1, or they can have an activator, or they're coaching kids working under them. The other little bit of information is that a level 1 can run an independent session as long as there's a level 2 in the vicinity. So if I'm a level 2 or above and I'm taking a batting drill on one part of the outfield, and just across from me, Stephen happens to be a level 1 coach, and he can be leading a fielding drill there because he's got enough knowledge, enough experience to run something on his own. But your coaching kids and your activators, they must be directly working with the more experienced coach. There's a fair bit of jargon and a fair bit of stuff thrown about there in the last couple of minutes, so I hope we've made it as user-friendly as possible.
A lot of detail, Andy, but again, good practice. We're here looking to protect the coaches. I think that's the most important. If the coaches are protected, they can create that safe environment for the players. I think that's the most important thing to take from that.
Yep, happy to move on, Stephen.
Perfect. So we've touched on coaching and our coaching pathway. And it probably came into the chat earlier about trying to include everybody within their sessions. So if you want to become a more inclusive coach, and I think it's very important that we all aspire to be more inclusive in our coaching, we have 2 organisations that run this on the island. So we have Disability Sport Northern Ireland, and we have Carver Sport Inclusion in the Republic, and they both run disability inclusion training programs. We ran one last March online. It's 2.5 hours. It's a certified course. We're going to be running one again this March coming. To date, I can send out an email as soon as it's booked in. So that's a certified course, and it just helps you make your coaching and your club more accessible to anybody with a disability. What you'll learn in that, you can modify and use at any level within your coaching. So it's another great initiative, Andy, and I'm sure it'd be a great tool for everybody to have in their coaching toolbox.
Yeah, definitely. We want to run good community clubs. We want to be as inclusive for everybody as we can. So yeah, the more knowledge we can gain, the better.
Brilliant. Then in terms of coaching structures, Andy, what can we do to make sure our club is supporting best practice?
Well, that's what the heading is there at the top of the screen. I'll come to coach of conduct in a wee minute. Competency chart, and player pathway. So if you're wanting players to develop as they progress through the ages and of the youth teams in your club, have you got some sort of structure in? By the time they're 10, we would love them to be able to execute these skills. By the time they're 11, by the time they're under 13, by the time they're under 15. So what skills really are you hoping that they have experienced and hopefully in the real world mastered? But everybody develops at their own pace, don't they? But hopefully a club has got some sort of structure where here's where we would love these players to be. And so the coach at that age group should be working on those competencies, because then they might move on to a new coach next year. At least that new coach then knows the sort of bit of the background coming through. Or a coach might leave a club, go across the water to work, might not leave for any other reasons, and he has to. With family commitments as well. So at least they're leaving behind some sort of chart to say, look, here's where all our players are. I mentioned a little bit more paperwork earlier on, and really what every good club should have is some sort of members code of conduct, probably an adult members code of conduct and an under 18 members code of conduct. The people coming along to participate at your club, what do you expect of them, and how are they supposed to conduct themselves while they're there? And then everybody can sign up to that, and everybody knows what the do's and don'ts are. Completely the same for coaches. Here's the do's and don'ts. Here's what we expect as a club of all our coaches. Everybody then can sing from the same hymn sheet, and exactly same for the parents. If everybody understands where the do's and don'ts are, it makes it a lot easier, and hopefully less issues then will arise. And with regards to safeguarding, are you highlighting who the key safeguarding people are at your club? So maybe it could be an issue about the coaching or about coaches. So we'll then go to the safeguarding officers, and hopefully we know who they are, because you can't always come through the coach all the time. So that might be identified in the clubhouse. It might be identified on your website, your social media, any paper documentation that you send out. So make sure everybody knows who to contact and what the procedures are.
And again, I think everything you've mentioned there, Andy, it's supporting coaches, and it's allowing for best practice in the club. Like, as you mentioned, the competency chart, my club have it on the door as you come in on the wall. This is what's expected of coaches at under 10s. This is what's expected at under 12s, under 14s, 16s. And exactly, it's usually 3 or 4 competencies everybody's expected to learn. And it supports, as you mentioned, succession planning. Safeguarding, again, it's on the door as soon as we come in. Contact name, contact mobile number, contact email, just in case a matter arises, we know where to get to them. Perfect. So moving on then, Andy, looking at the evolution of coaching.
Yeah, so we're one coach, and if you just we'll press one more time to get the next word up. Yeah, that's perfect if you leave it there, Steve. So obviously coaching itself has had to progress. And when I've told this story several times, so some of you will already know it. When I did my level 2 way back in the 90s, level 1 and 2 very quickly, and I learned loads and loads of what to coach. So there was loads of coverage of how to bowl off spin, leg spin, all the batting shots. So I knew loads of what to coach. And I started then out in my club, being probably the first level 2 qualified coach there was. And after about a month, good friend of mine, some of you will know, Artie Campbell, came up to me and said, look, Andy, you've obviously learned loads on that course, but you're really starting to annoy people. And I was completely blown away. I was there to help people. I wanted people to get better. And he says, no, you've got all this knowledge, but you're really, it's how you're delivering it. People are saying, here comes Andy McRae to tell me 3 things I'm doing wrong. Because it's back to that thing where coaches feel they need to fix things. They need to help make people better. So it was probably no fault of mine. I was young. I just didn't have enough life experience, didn't have enough people skills, loads of knowledge of what to coach, but no idea of how to actually deliver it and how to coach it. So Stephen, if you press your mouse twice there. So 10 years later then, I had become a tutor. and the ECB had moved on their coaching courses. They had evolved them, and it now included loads of how to coach. There was what the coach was still kept in there, but now we were delivering, here's how you go out into the real world, and here's how you engage with people, and here's how you kind of coach effectively. And it was superb. It really was. And there's loads of good coaches have come through those courses who are now working in really high level coaching environments. I'm glad to say that they just bought into that philosophy of how to deal with people. And it wasn't until I got involved fully in that then that I realized, yes, Artie was quite right. I wasn't delivering things very well. So then 10 years later, again, the ECB did another review of their coaching courses. And we've now got the what is still in there. The how is still in there. But the next layer they've added on is the why, the context, basically, of the sessions. So now coaches, when they're putting good sessions together, should really be asking, well, why am I putting this session together? Why is this relevant for these players at this particular minute? And who are my players and what level are they at, so that we all the players will know why we're doing this. I'm a Liverpool fan, a lot of time for Jurgen Klopp. So I was reading his biography, not his autobiography. And in one little sentence, about halfway through, it said, obviously at Liverpool Football Club, the what we coach is very important, but how we deliver it and why we're delivering it is far more important. So there in one little sentence, he had signified, the 30 years there of the evolution of these coaching courses through the ECB. And then, of course, all that learning, we have taken that into the Cricket Ireland coach education courses. So it's important that we move with society, and it's important that coaches keep evolving what is good coaching. Back to Stephen's little diagram, where bad coaching was in the bottom left-hand corner and good coaching was up in the top right-hand corner. Well, that's how we can stay in the top right-hand corner, keep gathering knowledge and keep educating ourselves and keep educating our coaches.
Brilliant. Great share again, Andy. So we've mentioned already about the code of conduct and how important it is. And it's very important that a club develops their own. So if you're coming into a new club or you're within your own club, best practice wise, the club has to develop their own code of conduct. Everybody has to be accountable to protect the players, protect the coaches, protect the parents. And that message has to be consistent. So once that code of conduct is designed, are we holding everybody accountable? Now, Andy, you've probably seen these 3 R's many times on many different coach education courses. So we've got rights, relationships, and responsibilities. Would you like to jump in on them?
Well, they pretty much say, it says what is it? Does what it says on the tin there on those 3. And anybody that's done a level 2 through the ECB, you've now got access to iCoach, which has all sort of codes of conduct, and that's where Stephen has seen them as well quite recently when we're talking about the ECB coaches. Stephen says that a club has to develop their own. Yes, you should make it specific to your club, but there are ways that you can kickstart that. So you could go on to the ECB iCoach and sort of say, well, here's what they're recommending. How can we take that good work and make it specific to our club? Or I know in the North Sport NI have got templates through their club mark scheme, so you can go on. They're generic, but you go on, you can download those, and then you can adapt those to suit your club. And I know there's something similar down south of the border, Stephen, isn't there?
There is indeed, and I will share that with everybody through an email at the end of this call. So exactly where you can find them on the Sport NI website and the Sport Ireland website, to develop your own and support your club. In terms of club planning, Andy, you've mentioned to me personally that your club is working on a development plan at the moment, and this is probably where some clubs struggle. Where to start, I think, is the most important thing, the starting point. So in terms of your club, where are you guys currently at?
Well, we've been doing club development plans since 1994, so we're on sort of our 10th one. We seem to do them every 5 years. It just seems to be a natural time. So many things can change within 5 years. We personally do it, evaluate the whole club, the finance of the club, the identity of the club, and that's what we're in the middle of doing. But obviously tonight's about coaching and cricket and coaching structures. But it's the same principle. I think the best place to start is at 12 o'clock there at the top of the dial, and work our way to the right, clockwise. So basically defining your club's mission. Do you know what you do? And what really do you want to do? So therefore you need to know what direction you're heading with regard to your coaching. We'll talk about it in a couple of slides time that might point you in a direction. So first little segment, what do you want to do? Second little slide, and how do you want to do that? So what are your values? How are you going to about achieving what you wanted to achieve in the previous segment? Moving around to the third segment, where are you at the minute as a club? Okay, so basically, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? So you want to do some sort of self-assessment. How you go about that, now we can have Google Forms and all that you can use. There's lots of different apps out there that you can gauge people's opinion. And probably the wider that you spread that, the better the quality of feedback you're going to get. So not just your committee, not just your coaches, get the players involved. What's the players' opinion? What's the parents' opinion? What do the community think of you? And then once you've sort of gathered that, what are you missing at the bottom there? What are you missing? What do you need? You've got some sort of idea where you want to go. You know what your strengths and weaknesses are, so you can now identify what you're missing. And from that, then that's when you really start actually saying, we've gathered all this information. Let's start putting a plan in place, creating that development plan. So through that, you probably want to set yourself some targets, some indicators for success. Who is going to take on those specific roles or those specific programs or projects that need to be tackled, and when are you hoping to get them achieved by? Now, you might not achieve them by the time that you want to achieve them, but if they're getting there, that's still a good place. That's still a good journey to go, even if they happen 1 month late, 2 months late, 6 months late. If it's a journey worth traveling, travel it. So that's, I suppose, SMART targets for those who are into all their target setting. So SMART targets are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and bound by time. And then it's down to you creating that plan, getting it down onto paper, and getting it communicated with as many people as you need to communicate with. Obviously, the more that understand it, the more that can help the journey and have more people pulling in the same direction. And then right at the top, before we get round to 12 o'clock again, you should always be reviewing it. Are we doing what we said we wanted to do? What's working? What's not working? Why is it working? Why is it not working? Continually tweaking and reevaluating. And then probably at some stage, 5 years later, start all over again. Because society will have changed and your club might be in a different place in 5 years' time, hopefully for the best. And I think, Stephen, I haven't talked about anything on the left, but I think all the good stuff is on that wheel.
Oh, no, exactly, Andy. Like, in terms of everything on the left, that's what usually comes out of it. Let's be honest. Like, our most recent one, I think we're in year 5. So in January, we'll be starting again. And our most recent coach competencies, that came from our last club development plan. And that supports all coach development in the club. It supports all the programs. It helps coaches plan their sessions because they know exactly what they should be teaching their kids at a certain age. And then, like everybody, we're always talking about facilities. So our club development plan helps us with fundraising. It tells us what we're going to need in 2 or 3 years' time in terms of facilities because we're growing. So it's a key tool. Brilliant. And then, Andy, myself and yourself were put on a recent webinar, and some of the stuff you're going to talk about was on that. So I'll let you talk about this. So what is coaching culture?
Yeah, this pulled directly from a webinar that Stephen ran about 4 weeks ago, and I was one of the audience members. It really struck a chord with me, I have to say. And I talked on the last slide about where does your club want to go and how do you want to do it. And I'll put this out there as a recommendation. And no way do you have to do it, but I think there's a few stories here worth listening to. So what is the coaching culture at your club? Or what is your personal coaching culture? Now, on the right-hand side, win at all costs seems very extreme. So it doesn't have to be as extreme as win at all costs. But if it's even winning matters, all right, winning is important, you're probably going to see loads of those things on the right-hand side that are in white, or that only the best players matter, that key players get more opportunities than others, I'm not going to read down the whole list. I'm going to highlight a few, but because I've got my notes from the webinar that I did that Stephen hosted. Mistakes are immediately corrected. That's adults jumping in and correcting kids' mistakes. Training is very performance-based. Repetitive drilling is used, and directed instruction is given by coaches to players. You know, if winning means that much to you, I think you've got you could open your eyes to a few other cultures. So I'll move to the left, the development coaching culture, where we're all about just developing people and helping them be better in the long term. And again, I'm not going to read through every single white bullet point. I'm going to highlight a few. Everyone matters. Everyone's included. A sense of belonging is created for everyone. Players are allowed time to reflect and to correct their own mistakes. So it's a bit like Stephen's story earlier where he put me on the spot and he said, what are you going to say to a young player who's just got out? Well, I'm certainly not going to jump in and tell him what he did wrong. I'm going to allow him time to reflect. At some point, I'll ask him a question. What happened? What's your thoughts on the situation? And how could you stop that in the future? How could you change that in the future? Players learn through getting opportunities to play. Coaches have a discovery coaching approach where they put people into scenarios and see if they can work out how to solve the problems themselves. And coaches use smart questions to stimulate players' thinking. Now, I know if I was a parent of children, I would certainly rather have them be on the left-hand side of the screen there at this club with a development coaching culture. I know if I was a player in the right-hand side culture and I was enjoying it, I would probably maybe be quite selfish, actually. So I think as a player, I would actually probably enjoy the other side as well, because more of my friends are probably going to be involved in that as well. I was going to say something there, but I've just had a wee mind blank. Oh yes, I know what I was going to say. And I was pulling that from a webinar that Steve hosted, and that's research done by New Zealand Sports. So this isn't just Andy McCrea and Stephen Maxwell sitting on a screen here. There's quality feedback has been done based on lots of research. I'm just checking my notes. And go ahead.
Just in terms of the coaching culture, and just an example, okay? So we taught an awful lot of coaches, especially at under 11s, 12s, 13s, this culture and where they sit on it. Coaches aren't so sure about it, okay? So let's take the example under 13s, and we've got selection, deselection issues, right? So the definition of selection is carefully choose according to certain conditions for a certain purpose, okay? So at under 13s in your club, would you select or deselect players at under 13s?
Well, firstly, we've got last year we had 45 kids and you have 11 on a cricket team. Well, you have to select a cricket team. You can't play all 45. But what's got to be known is what's going on to make sure as many people are getting as many playing opportunities as possible. So that the teams rotated, the opportunities in the games are rotated, that everybody knows they're going to get some sort of value and they're going to get some sort of chance to get out into the middle and play. As well, of course, all the good sessions and the practice stuff that's going on, we're catering for everybody. Can I tell a story, Stephen, that came up on the webinar? Because there was a guy on from another club, and I'll not name the club, and his story was a little bit like this, where at his club they have loads of under 11s, and when they get to under 13s, they have less players. People have under 11s have dropped off. By the time they get to under 15s, they had even less again, and at times we're struggling to get a team out. And I could sort of empathise with them, but I just spoke up in the webinar and I said, can I just come back to something that my club did 10 years ago? And it has definitely changed the culture in our club. So 10 years ago, we said that winning wasn't important in our youth teams. And it was more important to make sure everybody was enjoying their cricket and everybody was getting a chance to practice. And more importantly, everybody was getting a chance to play. So when you have 11 in a game, we were retiring batters after 4 or 5 or 6 overs, whether they were our best batters or not. Everybody got equal opportunity. And some coaches 10 years ago looked at me and said, what are you taking him off for? He's only faced 4 overs and he's not out. And then everybody got a bowl. We rotated the wicketkeeper as well, because let's be honest, when they're 11 and 13, they're not specialists. Well, what actually happened by not putting winning as the priority, we started to win. Because what happened was, by the time they were under 13 and under 15, number one, they'd stayed with us because they knew we had their backs. And number two, they were better because they'd had opportunity to play out in the middle. So we had more strength and depth, and we had bigger numbers of squad, so we were stronger. Okay, so by not having winning as our priority, we actually started to win. So you have to challenge yourself, whereabouts on these cultures do you sit? And I'm into all this and I love all this, but I thought the webinar a month ago was excellent, and it really struck a chord with me that it's the right way to go.
I'm glad to see you're still learning, Andy, so thanks very much for that. And just in terms of what you've been discussing there, Andy, what we've got to be aware of as coaches, and I think it's really important, there is late developers. So just because Stephen's not the biggest, the tallest, or the strongest at 11 years of age, Stephen could be a future international, and he deserves just as much coaching as Andy does, even though he might be same age but a bit taller. So that's brilliant, Andy. Thank you for sharing.
Just two stories, actually, if you go still on the coaching culture. I was on Twitter last night. There was a horrendous one on Twitter where a football coach in England, he must have been under 10s, and he put out an advert. Such and such football club under 10s are looking for an expertise centre midfielder, you know, and an expert central midfielder at 10 years old, you know. There's people living in a different sphere than I am, unfortunately.
There is people out there, but hopefully they're learning and progressing from watching this webinar. Thanks, Andy. So in terms of session planning, I think this is really important, and those that participated on the recent Core Coach course, which you were a coach developer on, Andy, there was an awful lot of emphasis on these three types here. So would you like to take this on?
Yeah, so the first is, you see on the right hand side, we've got learner in the middle. Okay, we have to think, what do the learners need out of these sessions? And there are three types. There's the practice type, there's the variable, and there's the game based. So fixed is you know, let's say hitting a stationary ball off a tee, a front foot drive. Can't be more fixed than that. And then we go completely the other way, where it's game based. Well, the most game based session you could have is a practice game, getting ready for an actual game. So those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. So a little story behind that. I probably realized about 10 years ago, again, when we were sort of reviewing that maybe my club were a little bit too fixed. Our players were technically developing, but once they get into the game, while their technique was good, they maybe weren't achieving enough outcome in a game environment. But they were still progressing. And then I bumped into a player I know from another club, and I happened to say to him, I see that your club and my club, our youth teams, seem to meet a lot in semi-finals and finals and stuff. So you're obviously doing pretty good work at your club. And he says, Andy, I don't really know why, because they're not really being coached. And I thought, well, that's a strange response. Why not? He says, well, they just play games all the time. And he didn't really understand what he was saying to me. So his club had a different culture where it was all about getting out of the middle. Let's learn through playing. And the TGFU there stands for
teaching games for understanding.
Teaching games for understanding. So his club and my club were coming at it in two completely different aspects, and we were meeting in the middle, and we're both relatively successful at what we're doing. But it just shows that you need a little bit of everything going on. The variable drill that sits in the middle is variable session planning, is where let's say it's front foot drive, so it's taking a fixed drill and developing on. So the feeds aren't always in the same area, so the kids have to react differently. They have to score runs in different areas off that particular shot area. So there's variety added in. It's not a full game, or it's not got to a game-based scenario, but there's still a variety of challenges to engage the kid fully in different ways, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. Yeah, so we want to engage the kids in different ways and challenge them in different ways. So we need to be coaching the all-around performer. And there are 5 performance factors. Now we'll start at the right-hand side, because that's probably the one we have least least effect over. So the top performers in the world operate on these 5 different levels, and lifestyle, they're obviously fitting their sport in. Okay, the professionals aren't employed, but there's lots of people out there who are fitting their sport in around their work and in around whatever environment they're in, their finance and relationships and all that stuff. So that's lifestyle. Back to the left, because that's probably the place where we mostly operate then. Lots of good coaching of technical skills. And I put my hand up and said I was doing it wrong. I was probably focusing as a beginner coach too much on the technical skills, all those cricket aspects there. Now, if you're a non-cricketer, obviously you take out the cricket skills, and rugby can put in tackling and kicking and passing and whatever. But we also need to make sure our kids understand they're learning physical skills, the alignment of their body, the agility, balance, coordination. And while we might do those within sessions, I think we need to address them and say, kids, look, we've just finished that little fielding drill. What technical skills did we learn? What physical skills did we learn? And hopefully then the children will say, you know what, I worked on my speed there, or I worked on my agility around those cones. So we need to have flagged these things up, that they're part of our sessions. Exactly the same with mental skills. We want to create mentally tough cricketers ultimately, and young people as well, mentally tough young people who can cope with the pressures of society and the challenges that life throws at them, as well as in their sport. So these are the sorts of things we should be flagging up. Your concentration was brilliant there, or building their confidence, and all the way down to, how are you getting on with coping with pressure? How did you deal with having to hit the winning run there today? Maybe they were successful, maybe they were unsuccessful. So they've got the mental skills as well then as the tactical skills. And for cricket, it happens to be hitting the ball in the gap, or from a fielding side, stopping the batters hitting a ball in the gap, making lots of decisions with how you executing your bowling variations, when do you execute them, playing to a plan, etc. So, we need to make sure, if we're going to coach well, we need to coach the complete performer. Because I, as I said, was too heavy on the technical area. And I know young players have coached in the past, and I feel sorry, I've let them down, where I focused too heavily on the technical stuff. They played their shots brilliantly, but they struggled to score runs, and then got themselves out frustrated because they went for a big shot that probably wasn't there. So they didn't have the mental strength to toughen it out, or they didn't have the tactical awareness just to rotate their hands a little bit and manipulate the ball to score runs. So apologize to all those people I've let down in the past, but I've been learning, and I keep wanting to make my sessions better.
It's brilliant, Andy. So the first time I seen this was on the recent ECB core coach, and you put them on the wall, and then allowing coaches after every session to have a look. Okay, did I tick these off? Did I tick these off? And I've actually laminated these and put them up for my sessions now, and I'm using the players to hold myself accountable. Did I touch on all 5 factors every session? And in fairness, the under-8s are loving this because they've went straight to their parents on the lifestyle thing and talked about finance with their parents. So at least they're learning something. But we're touching on all 5 in every session. So it's fantastic. There's an awful lot of feedback. Everybody's buying into it. So it's a great tool as well to use. So thanks for putting that together for everybody.
It's great that you're putting it up on the wall, because when kids see it up there, and then they can identify easier, take physical skills. Yeah, we've just done some agility work there. Well, yes, we've just done a little bit of balance work there. So it's easier for the kids to identify if you put those up on the wall, rather than floating around in the ether and maybe the coach not even mentioning them. Brilliant.
So in terms of that, putting all that together, that takes a bit of planning. So we're going to touch on planning now.
Yeah. Well, you've got 3 questions down the left-hand side. I'll maybe answer them all at the same time. How much time do you spend planning session? What should be in a session plan? And then reflection. Well, first of all, there has to be planning. Otherwise, the coaches are probably just turning up, probably doing whatever they feel is easy, probably doing whatever they want to do and maybe they enjoy doing. Probably lacks coordination. They're probably making it up as they go through the session. So therefore, it lacks overall structure. So I think there has to be some sort of season overview. Here's where we want this group of players to progress throughout the whole season. Within that, there probably wants to be some sort of skills broken down throughout that, related back to the last slide of the performance factors that we've just put up. And maybe at the end of stage, there needs to be nice targets. Now, players will not always meet those targets, but if we've got some sort of end goal, it's easier for them to work towards it. Just like you said about putting them up on the wall, people now are more aware of them. Of course, then throughout that whole journey of working through a plan, whether it be an actual seasons plan or a 12-month calendar or even 2 or 3 sessions which group together, you have to be flexible because you have to analyse what do I see in front of me. Maybe what we did tonight and we hope to move on from, we're just not ready yet and we need to redo that session tonight and spend another night doing exactly the same thing so that we put a better foundation in place. So 2 things before you move on. Reflection, yeah, and that's the players. The players have to have a chance to reflect. So build that into your plan. What have we learned? What have we done well? What have we not done well? How are we going to get better next time? And I think in general, I'm happy enough, I'm experienced enough, and gnarly enough to say I think there's too many clubs doing too many net sessions. Net sessions are not the be all and end all. There is certainly a time and a place for them, but young players have to learn skills. They have to be challenged in different ways. Yes, we need net sessions, but not every single week.
Brilliant. That's great to hear, Andy. Thank you. In terms of how much time do you spend planning each session, I'm probably doing too much, I'm not going to lie. So in terms of one session plan, I might spend 2 to 3 hours planning that based on where we are in the season, what we learned last week, what we're looking to do over the next few weeks. Are you on the same ilk, or do you have a certain amount of time that you spend on your planning?
I think it's different for different age groups. Our Wednesday, this is my club, our Wednesday night stuff is for our 4-year-olds to our 11-year-olds, and we've actually got a 12-week plan. And it's the same one we've used for the last 3 years because it's a good template. So it's a good starter. And then what we would do is we did that last week. However, we need to do it again. So we go back and we review it. So we're using that. And it's not a big lengthy document. It's literally got per session. It's probably got 30 words on a page. Because I'm big into, I should not tell, and I'm talking about my club here, I should not be telling people how to coach. They've got to put their own personality on it. They've got to put their own stamp on it. How they interact with kids has to be up to them because they need to be in their comfort zone as a coach. So the key points that need covered are there. So it's not a very wordy document. So I'm not spending as much time as you, thankfully, Stephen, because I have enough going on in my life about loads and loads and loads of session planning. But there has to be planning, and it might be even 2 or 3 coaches getting together 3 days before. Look, could you lead the fielding this week because we saw X, Y, and Z in the game, and the kids have said they want to develop that bit of the game further. So there's definitely prep before the next session.
Brilliant. And then the last thing I'll ask you on that, Andy, how do you reflect?
I reflect as I come away from the session. The drive home, and I live quite close to my club, but always in the drive home is a chance to think what worked, what didn't work, why did it work, why did it not work. You've asked me that question before. I'm a continual reflector on lots of aspects, and I'm always trying to make things better. I don't think we should ever say that is it nailed. I am never coming back to that, and I'm always going to do it that way from now on. That you're in a bad place because society's going to go past you and you're going to be stuck there. So we have to keep evolving. So the answer is I'm probably always reflecting, which you're doing all your planning and I'm doing all my reflecting.
Brilliant, and it's great to hear, Andy. And then just one example I've used recently in terms of my reflection, I've actually voice recorded my session and then listened back. What kind of questions am I asking my players? And it's a great tool. If any of the coaches are listening tonight, it's a great way of learning about yourself. What is my tone of voice when I'm talking to players? What kind of questions do I ask? Am I actively listening to what the players are feeding back? And then am I coming up with more questions based on that? So it's a great tool in terms of reflecting. Moving on from planning, then effective strategies, Andy.
I think that's about routines, and I've highlighted the word routines on your slide there. So basically, you want the whole thing to move as smoothly as possible. So if you maintain some routines, like players always sign in the same areas, or they meet up in the same areas. So they're not all over the place and they're whacking a ball around or whatever. Now, that does need to happen because that's a sort of nearly a warm-up and that's their social engagement. But you need some sort of coordination of that as well. So, do you always practice in the same area? Do you do a warm-up in the same area and then you move to a game or a skill area or whatever? So I think having an effective strategy is have a structure and have locations. Another thing, have the next activity set up in advance. So there's not, guys, hold on 10 minutes while I go and set up this next drill up. Well, that's 10 minutes where everything could go awry. So a little bit of coordination and back to your planning between the coaches so that players can move from one thing to the next at the right time. Create a habit, a little bit like you said earlier, create a habit of having a review with your players or a summary at the end. Really reinforces what have we learned today, and ask the question, players, what have you learned? You can be more specific and more open questions, more closed questions, entirely up to you. What you might find is, I haven't learned that much actually, and then you can reflect why. Maybe you talk too much, maybe they didn't get enough time on task, or maybe they've absolutely nailed it. Maybe they've picked up on all the key areas that you wanted to, and therefore that makes your review a little bit easier. So make sure it's quality practice. Quality practice leads to quality play. If they're just turning up and they're just having a bit of a hit and they're just having a bit of a wander around, that seems to me like that's going back to the supervision and not really proper coaching earlier on. Third bullet point down, maximize opportunities to practice. I give a really bad example of that earlier on. Coaches hitting one ball to 10 players. One player takes a catch while 9 stand and wait their turn to come and take their one catch. Buy another 5 or 6 tennis balls and put them into pairs, and the coach then isn't the hitter. They're putting balls up to each other. All of a sudden they're doing 5 times more practice, 5 times more touches of the ball. So think about how you can lay your drills out, how you can maximize activity, therefore maximizing opportunities to get better.
That's brilliant, Andy. And then I suppose arriving for practice and leaving the venue are very important to what's going to come next. So we're touching on parent relationships, and I think Amish touched on this, how to improve his relationship with parents. So if you want to take us through this one.
Yeah, there were a couple of other people who said getting parents on board. So when Stephen and I put this together, I looked at the 6 segments and I said, Stephen, see the 3 on the right, put them in a different color from the 3 on the left. Reason being, the 3 on the right are about the parents learning about your club. So if we start at 12 o'clock again and we go to the right, go clockwise, what's your club's vision? Are you sharing those with your parents so that you can educate your parents about how you want to go about things? Back to those cultures that I said earlier. Are you a development style culture club? Therefore, the parents need to know that. And then they'll probably share the journey a little bit more with you. Okay. And then are they learning the club's philosophy? So when their player, their beloved son or daughter is retired after facing 20 balls and not out, they need to understand why their son or daughter's been asked to, okay, well played, you can retire and let somebody else, rather than their son or their daughter monopolizing all of the strike as much as possible. So we need to educate the players, and that's probably what the educate the parents. That's what the right-hand side is all about. And then the left-hand side, as we come up from 6 o'clock and go left to roles and responsibilities. If the parents understand what you're trying to do, then there's more chance that they'll support you. So they'll support their sons or their daughters in your philosophy. Therefore, they're ultimately supporting the club in the right way. And that's through, maybe they'll take on some roles and responsibilities because they believe in what you're trying to do. Of course, they'll sign up to the codes of conduct a lot better because they understand the philosophy behind it. And then they'll keep the learning going because they'll be supportive outside of your club. The worst case scenario is those car conversations. So, there's been many surveys done where kids have been asked, what do you hate about sport? And the answer is, I hate going home in the car with my mum and my dad. Why? Because they always ask me, what did I do? They always highlight what I did wrong. So for cricket, it's how did I drop that catch? Or how did I not score the winning run? For rugby, it's how did I miss that conversion to win the game? Kids hate all that. And actually then it will stop them going to back to sport, because they don't want to then have those awful conversations with their parents. So if parents are educated and parents can understand that, you're going to get those supportive conversations in the car home, which was, how did you enjoy that? What was the best thing that happened tonight? Did you have fun? What did you learn? So when parents get involved with those open questions, the kids can then feel as if, well, mom and dad are singing from the same hymn sheet here as my coaches. This is a good place to be.
And in terms of our coaching, Andy, to me, if we can keep the learning going on the way home in the car, we are winning as coaches, irrespective of what's happening on the field. Because if the learning keeps going home in the car, it might happen in the garden the next day, and they might be enjoying it with their parents, and then they're eager to come back to your session the next day. And that, to me, that's winning.
Yeah, I agree. And just back to the point that you made about putting my performance factors up on your wall. And I always, and I've said this on coach education courses many times, I always think my evaluation is, what is the conversation that's going on in the car between a son and his mom, or a daughter and the mom, or whoever's driving the car. And if the player is saying things like, when the parent asks, what did you learn tonight, or what did you do tonight, and the player says something like, yeah, we played a bit of a game, or we did the front foot drive, I have not done my job as a coach in that session. But if the player is saying things like, yeah, we did a bit of technical work, we were working on the front foot drive, and it was linked into some tactical work where we're trying to score runs in certain areas. In between that, we're doing a bit of physical work with some speed drills to try and make us quicker between the wicket. Well, then that kid has absolutely nailed that. And the only reason that kid has nailed it is because the coach has nailed it in the session, and all those things have been highlighted, probably by them being up on the wall.
Brilliant, Andy. Again, thanks for sharing loads in that one. Again, it's so important, and we had an awful lot of coaches asking those questions. To sum up the last hour or so, the topics we've covered, what does best practice look like? Hopefully we've ticked that box for the coaches. We touched on the evidence-based research, which I'll happily send out to everybody. That's no problem at all. What is great coaching? Andy summed that up on numerous occasions as we went over. It's fair to say we're all encountering the same type of challenges. The last point there in terms of how to develop those parental relationships. The most important thing in terms of protecting ourselves and our clubs, do we all have the minimum requirements? Andy took us through our coaching pathway, which is great. We have so many activators across the country. It's now important, can we bring them along to, as far as those ECB courses. As I mentioned, in March again next year, we'll be doing inclusive coaching with Sports and Cara Sports Inclusion Ireland. That's a certified course which will help you. Again, good practice, ratios, structures, strategies, and developing those relationships. So Andy, thank you very much for taking us through those topics tonight.
No problem at all. Information overload, I'm sure.
And just in terms of learning outcomes, hopefully following the webinar, you're now able to apply the minimum requirements expected of a coach, describe what good coaching should look like, establish good coaching structures in your club. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight.